Sample Y3K is a third-person tower defense game, where the player acts as a support role but is also the main endpoint. This means that the only way for the game to actually end is if the player loses all their health points. This can only be done by one of two ways. One, the player is attacked by the enemies and their health reaches 0, or they are unlucky to make it back to an oxygenated zone to regain their health. Sample Y3K is themed around a horror and comic book style. Horror is mainly in the idea that this is set in a space setting where the player has to survive not only against the enemies but in these zones by staying oxygenated. The comic book is more so in the physical appearance of the game, with the thicker lines and a cartoon-like feel. The main mechanic of Sample Y3K is the fact that it's a tower defense, and it's a third person. The main mechanic of Sample Y3K is the tower defense aspects and the third-person shooter aspects. We thought combining these would make for a unique experience for the player.
The game takes place in a research facility on a far-off planet. Each level is one of the many rooms or laboratories within said facility. The player starts off in the sleeping quarters, the game's tutorial level. And here, a leftover turret takes out the approaching grunts, showing players that turrets can defend the player, so the player makes more. The player moves on to the loading bay, a much more open-ended level, and must now defend against imps that are smaller and weaker than grunts, but a lot faster. In the next level, the warehouse, the player is introduced to long shots, which snipe the player from a distance. Next up, a personal favorite of mine, the research facility, where players are first introduced to the behemoths, hulking behemoth monsters that attack everything in sight. And finally, the hangar bay, the final level where players get everything thrown at them as the last gauntlet of the game.
The initial vision of Sample Y3K was a tower defense game with a horror aspect. The current design in which the game is taken during the development process still adheres to that. However, a lot of the core mechanics and aesthetics that we initially desired to be in the game no longer exist. The primary reason for that is because of not only the time frame in which we had to develop this game, but because of a dominant strategy that was brought to our attention late in the development process. The player used to be able to purchase debris from the radial menu and help path the enemy AI physically through the implementation of the debris. However, it was apparent that the players tended to barricade themselves into a corner or some other vice so they could effectively make the enemy AI not physically be able to reach them and hence damage them, basically rendering the game completely void. We later designed it so that the oxygen within the game could prevent this, as well as taking out the debris pathing.
One thing that worked greatly in our team's favor over the course of the project was our vision for the game. From very early on, our team was on the same page about our goals for the look and feel of the project, and we were able to always work towards that single unified goal. The game engine itself was also a large strength of ours. Working in Unity allowed Team Time Mage members to leverage their individual strengths, as well as take advantage of our instructors' experience and online documentation. Integration of the art team was also a large asset to us, and allowed us designers to better focus on gameplay and systems design. While much of the project went well, there have certainly been a few hiccups in the production as well. These were largely aggravated by the online collaborative nature of the project. Communication between team members could have stood to be much better, especially towards the tail end of the project, managing new work schedules and time zone gaps. Multiple server and source control related issues often slowed our work down as well, and made it difficult to ensure that everyone had access to a working version of the files being used. Overall, though, I believe we all put our best foot forward and created a project that we can look back at and be proud of.